has its proper time that it has to begin. There was a chuppah once in Yerushalayim, and the chuppah was being delayed, and finally it came down to it. The chassan put his hand in his pocket for the kiddushin ring. The Shlomo, you brought it? Yankel, you brought it, right? Aaron, you brought it. Huh? It wasn't there. And someone had to run to some other neighborhood to go get it, and the other was like, hi. And when he finally got it, he was so nervous that as he lifted it up to show it to the Eidim, he dropped it. Oh, yeah. And in front of everyone, it went rolling, and rolled into like a sewer grate. And now they have to get the Yerushalayim, the Chaverim, or I don't know who they use exactly, the Air Force, whatever, it opens up sewer grates and pull it out. So somebody said, the Brisker Rav was standing there, this is Vade, not a good simon, doesn't look good. The Brisker Rav told him, Chas v'shalom, he said, every chuppah has an exact time that it is supposed to take place. It's not the exact time yet. It's nothing to do with, it's not a bad simon. Everything in this world takes place at exactly a certain time. Many years ago, I was in the old city for Shabbos. And I went for a walk with a friend of mine, actually two friends of mine. And we took a stroll. It was a difficult Shabbos. There were a lot of riots, different things were going on. So we thought it was a good week to take a stroll in the Arab Shuk. And if you like stories, We did look Jewish, though. We were dressed with our Shabbos attire. And we kind of got lost. And we couldn't find our way back to where we were staying. And we were getting a little nervous because we got kind of the message that people weren't so polite. And from the distance, we saw two soldiers going, and we ran over to them and breathed a sigh of relief. And we asked them if they can walk us back to the old city where we were staying. And they said, of course not. They're going to where they're going. Why should they walk us back? And we said, please, it's pretty dangerous here. So they said to us, listen, you want to follow us, you can follow us, wherever we're going. But we're not walking you back. We have to be by our post. So we followed them, thought this may be interesting. It's Shabbos afternoon. And they got to some remote tower, someplace, I don't remember where, in the Arab part of the city. And it was some Gothic tower that was there from, way back times of the Crusaders. It had like these, the wooden doors that come to this oval top. And one of them climbed up through a window, dropped down, and opened these huge bolts. It was one of those things you kind of imagined that some monk with a rope tied around his thing in a hood is going to open it up and say, more Jewish children we're going to kidnap over here. I was getting heebie-jeebies and all those stories I read. And we walked in, and he closed the door behind us. And the soldiers informed us in no uncertain terms that they're not staying down here. They have to go up on top of the roof where they peer down and whatever they do. Now the problem was the elevator over here was broken in this 16th century castle. Even if they had some type of rope elevator that they pulled, that didn't seem working. So I think the stairs are okay, even though it was after a plate of chont. It gets a little bit hard, but thought we can do it. I'm not exactly in as good shape as Uncle Yankel, but I think we can make the run up. And you keep yourself right.
Yes, you don't have trauma.
That's right. Anyway, but there was no stairs, and there was no elevator, and there was no escalator. What was there? I'll tell you this story many times. My father, Sven Levracha, came to America the first time, and he was in Manhattan, and he saw an elevator. They didn't have elevators in Sokolov in Poland. And he said the door opened up, and this little kid went running in, and the door closed. And afterwards, the door opened up, and an old man walked out. He said, I'm not walking into that machine. I don't know what that does over here in America, but okay. So the only way that there was to get up to the top of the castle was, believe it or not, a rope ladder. Now, B'chlal, I'm not so good with ladders. It's one of the reasons I didn't become a roofer, amongst other reasons. But I'm not really good with firemen, I'm not very good with a rope ladder. Although I once saw, when I was a bacher, going for tachlis, so I met a prospective father-in-law, and he asked me, this is the question that he asked me, what I want to be when I grow up. I thought that was a little, so I told him I want to be a fireman. And he was taken aback, and he went back to the Schachter and said, "Why did you say that?" I said, "Ask him why." He said, "When I grow up." I mean, I would imagine I'm grown up. So again, I'm not good with ladders. This was a rope ladder. You know what a rope ladder is? It hangs down and it like goes back and forth. And these two guys went up the ladder, and I was next. And they said, "You're coming," you know. And I'm like, "You're coming," and you know. And my two friends somehow managed to go up, and here I was. So I had one choice: either to stay down there with facing a possible riot, where I would have to employ all of my self-defense strategies and security systems, and being that I hadn't any, so the only way was to go up this rope ladder. And I started going up the rope ladder. It was quite high, 3-4 stories up. Wow. The fact that my good friends on top were shaking it back and forth to add to the excitement did not help. And when I finally made it to the top, they reminded me I'm going to have to come down this thing. I said to myself, you know, it's amazing what you do if you have to. And if you would have told me go up a rope ladder, I would have never in a million years said yes. I would have never done it. But somehow I was told, you know, if you're all alone and there is no other choice, and even though it's swinging back and forth, we do it. How many things are there in life that we would do if we know that there is no, thank you very much, if we know that there is no other choice, that you have to move on? For some of us, rope ladders are scary. Now, today, it actually happened today in class. So one of my bachrim, very fine bachar actually, but he gets excited sometimes. And in Milah Shir, there were these two helicopters that were following each other, like military-style helicopters out of the window. And in Milah Shir, he blurts out, "Wow, look!" Everyone jumped up and ran to the window. And I turned to him, and he was like, Rabbi, charge on my credit card, please," he said. That's the way he answered. That was too cute. They couldn't punish him afterwards. Besides that he's bigger than me. But I thought that was really like, it's a certain concept that we have. Hey, you know, a bunch of them, don't punish me right away. You can always charge it on your credit card. Can you do an Aveira and charge it on your credit card? And not get punished, or you get punished later with interest? Does it work that way? The Mesilas Yesharim explains very clearly that we are fully accountable for every single thing that we do. And Kalawaimer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Vatran Lemiyayi, it says, yeah, everything. You get up there, nothing disappears. That's on our rap sheet, that's on our record. We've mentioned many times the Vilna Gaon was once walking on the street, and there was a bacher who was walking on Shabbos, and he was smoking, and he was in the company of some very unruly friends. It didn't look good. And the Vilna Gaon went over to him and said, "Aren't you worried about Bittul Torah?" And he said, "Do you think Bittul Torah is my problem? Like, you know, I'm smoking on Shabbos, and I don't want to say what he was doing, but who he was with." So the Vilna Gaon said, "Who do you think is going to get punished at Bittul Torah? Only the Yeshiva Bacher?" Says, "You're not." He says, "We'll get to the Bittul Torah too. After the finish with the Chil Shabbos, and after the finish with everything else you're doing, we'll get to the Bittul Torah." So the Mesilas Yesharim asks a question. But on the one hand, we see this tremendous stress in Chazal, that nothing is taken for granted. Nothing just gets erased off the record unless you do tshuva. So what does it mean, chesed and rachman? There's so much chesed, there's so much rachman. So the Mesilas Yesharim essentially says that the rachman and chesed means that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is not quick to judge us. That a Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't punish instantly, but the Rabbi Shalom will wait as long as it is possible to wait, in the hope that the person does tshuva. Kadosh Baruch Hu does things in his timetable. But if you look closely at the words of the Mesilas Yesharim, I think he's saying more. There's a bacher that once wrote to the Stipler, and he writes about all the things that he looked at that he ought not to look at. And it started by Einis, and from Einis it went to Shaygig, and from Shaygig it went to Mezid, and from Mezid, you know what happens afterwards. It goes to Mitzvah. You know, it's a Mitzvah to do it. And he really was very distraught about this, and he felt, will he ever have a tikkun? And the Stipler writes a very interesting thing back to him. He says, how many times did you not look? He says, why are you dismissing? You're letting your Yetzer Hara take your dark found. You're letting your Yetzer Hara take your failures, and you're saying, you know, I'm a failure. What about for every time that you didn't look? So he says, but I looked. He says, what am I going to do with the other? So the Stipler's understanding of Chesed and Rachmim is that a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the Sefer Talmud Devarim talks about this as well. The Rebbe doesn't offset mitzvahs for Averis. It doesn't work 10 mitzvahs, 10 Averis, we'll knock it out, we'll make an even exchange. Mitzvahs are mitzvahs and aveiros are aveiros, and that's the great rachmim. Because normally, if someone sins against you and you're so angry at him, you don't want favors from him. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes our mitzvahs regardless. Mitzvahs are not pass or fail. The other inyan, in response to the Mesilas Yesharim's question, that if nothing is looked away at, what does rachamim mean? It means that when someone is going through a difficult time, he simply says, Ani maimin be'emunah shalema, I believe that the world is not hefker, that I have to go through this process, it's all hashgacha, and the Rabbi Shalom is going to carry me through. Like I've heard often from Rabbi Melech Bider Mizal, he says, that's the guy he said from his father, or someone, he came home, he said he lost money. He lost money. He says, why'd you lose money? He said, because there was a hole in my pocket. He says, no. He says, there was a hole in your pocket because you had to lose money. Look at the world differently. If a person has a munah, in difficult situations, and he says, I'm going through this process, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu is measuring to the millimeter, semi-millimeter, exactly what I have to go through, then no yid should have tzaris. But acknowledging that it's all hashgacha and the world is not hefka is a tremendous kapara. And when a person does that, the Rebbeinu Shem says, okay, let's chuck off a lot of his aveiros. Moshe HaKadosh also says that min sukoseyam yatzilem, that if a person is going through a difficult time, whether it's emotionally, whether it's financial distress, whether it's shalom bayis issues, children issues, the more he gets himself to say this is a gzeira min hashemayim. Now the word gazer means to rip, because Baruch Hu measures it perfectly. So that alone creates a hamtakas adinim. The Rebbeinu says, hold off. This is a story about one of the Slanim Rebbes. He asked one of his chassidim to do him a favor. The chassid was sick. He says, after you pass away, come back and tell me what the din is like up there. Which obviously is a little bit of a tall order. But Lamaisa, he came back. And he said, Rabbi, there's not that much I could reveal to you. He said, what could you reveal to me? He said, I can reveal to you that Gehenim is hot. I knew that before. Then you don't know how hot. He says, it's... somebody once went up to Shemayim and they gave him a choice. You want to, because sometimes he davened Svart, sometimes he davened Ashkenaz, sometimes he had a gartel, didn't have a gartel. They said, you want a Chassidish Gehenim or you want a Litvish Gehenim? He said, what's the Litvish Gehenim? They told him 110 degrees. And and it starts by this man, 72, 60 minutes, by Shkia it starts. He says, what's the Chassidish Gehenim? So Chassidish Gehenim is 180 degrees. And he says, it starts an hour earlier. He says, I'll take the Chassidish Gehenim. He says, why? He says, because I know 180 is not going to be 180, and the hour is not going to be the hour it's supposed to start. He says, I'm better off over there. Anyway, so he came to him and he said, listen, he said, Gehenim is really hot. It's tzaris. So the Rebbe said to him, what's the Eitzah? He says, I'll tell you a secret. Which is obviously not a secret anymore. He told the Rebbe that they call out, who had a munah in his life? That whenever he went through difficult times, that it's all hashgacha. And who had a munah in his life, that even if he didn't go through difficult times, that's only b'chazdei Hashem, but at any moment the Kadosh Baruch Hu can pull the carpet out from underneath him. My life is in your hands. He says, if you can answer legitimately yes, they cannot get a malach to take you to Gehenna. He says the Gehenna is there, it's all set, but there's no transportation available. They can't get anyone to take you there. So that's the manifestation of chesed and rachamim, which we trigger upon ourselves simply by believing that every mashu of tsar that a person goes through is a hashgacha elyaina. There was in Kashnitz a young bacher by the name of Meilach, and they called him Meilach Chussid. And Meilach was a tremendous masmid. He was a weak little kid. And in those days there was the terrible gzeir of the Kantaristan, which is the czar would take Jewish kids and send them off for 20, 30 years, and they would basically never see their parents again, and it was not a good master. And because every town had a quota of kids they had to produce, and unfortunately in some situations the rich paid off, so that there shouldn't be their kids, there should be other kids, so things got very complicated. When the Tsarist government demanded that the Rabbanim produce the kids, the Rabbanim resigned, they appointed their own Rabbanim. It wasn't very exciting. So this young bacher wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and his mother says, I don't want you to go out on the street today because I heard that the chappers are here. These were kidnappers that simply grabbed kids to fill the quota. And you couldn't go to the police because they were the police. So he woke up at 3 o'clock the next morning. He said, 3 o'clock, I can go out. I'll go to the mikveh and I'll get ready. They're not on the street yet. Well, it turned out they were on the street and they grabbed him. And then when the mother realized her son is not coming back, she ran to shul. He never got to shul. And somebody said they saw him tied up on a wagon. And she ran to the cousin Samagid. And my only son who'll never survive the rigors of military training. And you're talking about a young kid ripped away from his mother. And she cried her heart out. And the cousin Samagid told her, your son's going to come back. But she wasn't appeased with the words. She began to scream and cry, and the cousin Samagid just sat down to drink his coffee before davening. And he said, before I drink this coffee, your son's going to be back. So at that point, the Hasidim were sure that this was going to be instant. So they ran out in all different directions to look to see where he's coming from. But he wasn't coming. And they looked and waited and waited and waited, and it's about a half hour. And finally he comes running. And the cousin Samagid looks at him and says, because you were so stubborn, my coffee is cold, he said. And he walked away with a little blink in his eye. And they turned to Mailach and they said, what was that all about? So he said, listen, he was grabbed, he was thrown onto this wagon, he was very frightened. He knew he'll never see his mother again, never see anything again. And all of a sudden they see another guy walking. He also thought he'll wake up at 3:30 in the morning. And they grabbed him and they threw him in and they tied him in. So he said, listen, we have each other to be mechazik each other, at least that'll help. He says, suddenly, I see to my right, I see somebody running along. Somebody running with a white beard. And I say, there's no way in the world he can keep up with this wagon. Either this wagon is going super slow, or this is a mirage, or he's a Liyoy Navi. And the man with the white beard says, Mailach, spring it up, jump off the wagon, come on. He says, I'm tied up, just jump off the wagon, just jump. So Mailach says, I'm not jumping unless my friend comes along with me. So he says, well, I don't have permission, I can only do what I was sent for. He said, well then go back. So the man disappears, and they thought they were hallucinating, and then they see him running again. And they notice that the soldiers don't see him. He says, Mailach, spring it up. He says, Ich spring nicht, not I'm not jumping unless this other person jumps with me. He disappears. The third time he appears, I'm warning you, I'm going to give up. So give up. You're going to be gone for 35 years. I said, I'll be gone for 35 years. I'm not going without him. Finally, he comes back in desperation. He says, okay, the two of you. And they both proceed to jump. So now they knew what the cousin Samagid meant when he said, because you were so stubborn, my coffee got cold. The beer, Shtickle, and the Maisu have discussed many times that the Maral says Eliyoy Hanavi appears in many, many different ways. Sometimes he appears as Eliyoy Hanavi. Sometimes he may appear as just somebody on the street. And sometimes the Maral explains, the Maranayim also, you're in a crisis and you are suffering. And in your crisis, you suddenly have this sense of, you know what, things are going to be okay. Whatever it is, my life is in your hands, and you feel better. That is a hisgalis of Eliyoy Hanavi to your neshama. If you're ever tossing and turning in bed at night, and you're worried, and you can't fall asleep, and all of a sudden, you say, you know what, whatever it is goodbye. I turn around, I go to sleep, like that famous story, which was said 1,000 times. But it's a good story, so I use it a lot, and use the story a lot. I mean, not just the story, but he said, his wife says, Shlomo, why aren't you sleeping? He says, what should I do? I owe the neighbor upstairs $1,000, and it's due tomorrow. He says, who? Yankel. So she opens the window, she screams up, Yankel! What? My husband is not paying you, period. He goes, now let him be up and you go to sleep, and that's all. Let life go on. They had a different mahalach in the town, how they got things done, middle of the night. And when Yankel meets Chaskel, and he says, Chaskel, yeah, but want to buy a watch? He says, I don't need a watch. You don't need a watch? It's the town clock. What do you need a watch for? He says, what do you want to see what time it is in the middle of the night? He says, for that I have a shofar. You have a shofar? He says, how does a shofar tell you what time it is? It's simple. When I wake up, I go, Kia! And my neighbor screams, are you out of your mind? It's 2:30 in the morning! So you go, what do I need a watch for? Have a shofar. Okay. So, Akopanim, if you're tossing and turning at night, and there's something that's keeping you up besides a shofar, and you're really worried about something, and to be able to sleep, you need a certain amount of menuchas hanefesh, a certain amount of yeshiv hadas. And you get up, you pace back and forth, and suddenly you have this sense, and it's not that something really changed. You just have this sense, you know what, I'm not going to worry about this. Whatever will be, will be. And you fall into a relaxing sleep. You should know that what could have happened now, explains the Maral, is that Eliyahu Navi came to your neshama. You were Zaycha to Gili Eliyahu. And Eliyahu will come to a person when there's Mesiras Nefesh. When there's Mesiras Nefesh for someone else. So when the Kashrus Hamagid, I don't know what kavanas he had with the coffee, but he was not going to touch a coffee for the rest of his life until this person came back. And he would not jump off the wagon unless the other person jumped off. Do you understand that it is this Mesiras Nefesh that creates the Eliyahu Hanavi in our life, that gives us Menuchas Hanefesh? Famous story of this guy that went to a Chacham, and he said, Father used to share this with me. He says, I want to be Zaycha to Gili Eliyahu. He says, why? Be good on my Shidduch resume. And please, so he tells him what to do. You fast for 40 days. You go to the mikveh each night, crack the ice, go at Chatzais, give a lot of tzedakah. He gives him a whole rundown, technically what he has to do. Say Tillim, thinking Chatzais is going out of his mind, pushes through the 40 days. He's waiting that night. He waits he's in the middle of the night. He's pacing back and forth. He took out the old svarim, opened them up on the table. Figures Eliyahu will knock. He's going to go, hello. Rabbi Eliyahu, what a surprise. He'll do it casually. The only one that knocks is at 3:30 in the morning. He asks, who's there? He goes, Yitzchak the Shikker, the town drunk. He says, town drunk, get out. He's just freezing. Let me in and warm up by your oven. Get out. He says, why aren't you letting me in? He says, I'm expecting an important guest. He says, what are you expecting, Leo Anavi? He says, don't be smart, okay? So he sends him away, and he waits till the morning, and Eliyahu Hanavi does not show up. And when Eliyahu Hanavi does not show up, so the situation gets very, very complicated. What's going to be here? What's it Zayin? Then he runs to the Rav and says, what should I do? So the Rav tells him, he says, listen. He says, Eliyahu Hanavi came to you, you didn't let him in. He says, he did not come to me. He says, Yitzchak the Shikker was Eliyahu Hanavi. But why did he say he's Yitzchak the Shikker? He says, because Eliyahu has a mahalach. His mahalach is that if you don't open the door for a yid in the middle of the night because Eliyahu is coming, he doesn't come to you. Okay? So I don't know if we're Zaycha to the open inyan of Eliyahu Hanavi, but definitely how the Maral and the Marinayim explain Eliyahu Hanavi. That we're Zaycha to a Simchas HaChayim. That we're Zaycha to a certain sense of Menuchas HaNefesh, a Yeshiv Adas, of peace and tranquility in our mind. That comes only through an act of Mesiras Nefesh. An act of Mesiras Nefesh creates Chesed and Rachamim in a different sense. I had a friend of mine told me an interesting story. He does consulting for heating systems and cooling systems. So there's another third friend, a mutual friend, that was having problems with it. It was the middle of the winter and he couldn't get his boiler on. It just wasn't turning on. He would turn it on, puff, puff, it would go off. He would turn it on, puff, puff, it would go off. They called this plumber, that plumber. No one could figure out the problem. So he called him. He says, I know you're a consultant to big companies, but can you do me a favor? Can you please come down? Because we're freezing. So he comes down, he's studying the system, he's studying the boiler, back and forth, and suddenly he says to him, I figured out the problem. He says, the problem is that your boiler thinks that there's carbon monoxide, but it really isn't carbon monoxide because they tested it with 2 other meters, and it's just a mistake, and that's why it keeps things. So I'll just replace that safety switch, which is obviously the sensor's off, it's not reading it. He says, can you do it now? He says, I can do it now. And as he's checking, he says, I got to tell you something else. Okay? He says, there's another safety switch that's broken in your boiler. Your boiler does not have a drop of water in it. He says, but if the water level goes below a certain point, it's supposed to automatically shut off. He says, I know what it is supposed to, but you have one safety switch that shuts off the boiler when it's not supposed to, and you have another safety switch that fails to click in. He says, by the way, had you been successful in turning on this boiler, that would have gone overnight, he said, your roof could have been on the moon. And I don't know what else would have been there. He said before it became mandatory to put in safety switches, the automatic shutoffs for water. I don't know what I'm talking about, Menachem, but that's the story they told me. Am I making sense? He said before it became mandatory to put in the safety switch for waters, there was an average of 2 houses a week in every metropolitan area that went up in flames, that exploded. So he just realized here was a malfunction in his boiler that no one could pick. Why the boiler is shutting off. And no one could figure it out. It's like, Rabbi, what do you want from me? I have to heat my house. I can't get it started. And that carbon monoxide malfunction may have saved his life. So a lot of times there are things that just aren't going. We can't get it started. And the Rebbeinu Shalom is saving your life. So I told this story to somebody. He asked me a good kasha. He says if Hashem wanted to save his life, Hashem could have just added water. Like, why did Hashem have to go like this way? So I said, you're right. In all these stories, that saved his life. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need our eitzes. The Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't need safety switches to save our life. But pshat is that maybe, just maybe, and being that I happen to know this person who's a tremendous Talmid Chacham, the softest person, and I met him by Marav, he says, my boiler's not going on, He says, I don't know what's going to be. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants something from me, I don't know what it is. He says, maybe that's what saved your life. In other words, technically speaking, you're right. Because this safety switch turned off the boiler, that didn't turn it on. You want to go technical, but there's a deeper Indian than the technicality over here. In life, sometimes we are faced with setbacks. We are faced with situations that are supposed to work, yet they do not work. It's supposed to happen, yet it does not happen. And we're saying, what does the Rebbeinu Shalom want from us? Why can't I get simple things done? And the answer is, the Rebbeinu Shalom wants something from you. And this is the greatest gift. But the gift only comes when you recognize that everything is hashgacha. There was a story in a girls' camp once that someone told me he was the administrator of the camp that year. Now, some of these camps, they have these old school buses that they keep inside, old desks, and they use it for maintenance, and it has one light bulb in front and one light bulb in back and a bunch of mufflers hanging from it, and I don't want to say what it's similar to, but they're registered as farm vehicles. They don't even have regular plates. He says one of these trucks seemed to have a mind of its own, and it started rolling down a hill. And it was rolling down a hill, and it was on a direct collision course with a bunch of kids playing on swings. And all of a sudden there was a beep, and the kids looked up and ran for their lives, hit the swings, demolished it, and Baruch Hashem, nobody was hurt. But all of a sudden there were rumors abound. Who beeped? There was nobody in this truck. It was getting spooky. Was it Leo? Was it the ghost of the truck? Who was it? No, it was. It was this delivery truck that was trying to get into the front gate, which was supposed to be open, and someone locked the gate. And he was going beep. Okay, so the beep goes over there. But we don't know which horn or which frustration in our life is meant for us. Not that, again, that a Kadosh Baruch Hu needs eitzes. A Kadosh Baruch Hu could have made that the truck shouldn't roll to start with. But the point is that when it happens, when there's an annoying hunking in our life, remember, Kadosh Baruch Hu is trying to help you if you respond correctly. And I saw a story in one of the books, and I remember that this man is driving, listen, and he sees like a police car in the rearview mirror, goes, pulls over to the side, the guy rolls by, didn't mean him. Then he realized that the siren was on a tape. He was listening. It used to be something called a cassette tape. For those of you over here, it looked like this. It had two holes in it, It was next. They had kerosene stoves, and they had these. The milkman had these pumps, and they had these cassette tapes. And you also had to turn the car to get it started. That some cars still have. Okay. So Lamaisa, it turned out he was listening to a daf Yom Yishir that was said 7 years ago, and there was a police car that passed by, and the siren was on the tape. And that siren that was on the tape caused him now to pull over. Okay, and as he starts driving, he turns the corner of the highway. There's a massive pile-up. A tractor trailer turned over. Cars were crushed. There were fatalities. And he realized that had he not pulled over, he could have very well been in this. Right? We know the cheshbainis that the Rebbeinu Shalom has, that something that yells or screams now is for 7-8 years down the road. You know what it's all about? There's a story of a yid. He was a tired yid. He was a shaychet. He was always nice to everybody as much as possible. And he has this. He's about to close Friday, and a lady comes running and bangs on the door. Please, open up. Can you Schachter chicken for me? He says, I can't. It's almost Shabbos. I can't. He says, please. Why are you coming the last minute? I don't have money for chicken tomorrow. I can't. I'm sorry. And he wakes up, and it was all a dream. Because what a strange dream. He doesn't remember ever doing that. Anyway, many years passed, and he's an old man now, and his family is standing next to him. And he's making Kiddush, and all of a sudden, boom, he freezes in the middle of Kiddush, grabs the chicken on the table, runs out with it. The family's like, chasing him, and he's running through the town, holding the bread, running. He knocks on the door of a certain almana, and he gives it to her. He's an old man. He never ran so fast in years. And he says, here, take this chicken. He says, as I was making Kiddush, it hit me, this just happened. today. He was old man, didn't have so much patience. He was tired, and this lady knocked at the last minute and cried. She didn't have money till now for a chicken. I said, that was the dream I had 20 years ago. He says, so he was so frightened. He made the connection with the dream. They just brought her his family's food. He said, we'll eat kish tonight. Nothing's gefährlich. And that night he passed away. So he had this dream 20 years ago to alert him, to warn him, not to have to go up to the Olam Elyon with this thing. So you realize how complex this is in terms of past, present, or future. Hoya hoida v'yiyah. How HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't know if an agmas nefesh that we're going through now, it saves us in the future, if it saves us in the past. To the Rabbi Shalom, it is all one thing. And I know I said this, Marshall, a lot of times. I want to get right to the point with it. You go to the dentist. So I had one kid that hated going to the dentist, and of course he has the biggest problem with his teeth. He hates the dentist, but he likes candies. So we're there, and the dentist takes out this little thing, and he says, okay. The dentist, he says, this is called sleepy water. He learns, sleepy water. He sees a needle. He's like, no. You know what I mean? Holding him down. He tells him, you count, the dentist tells him, you count to 5, and then it's going to be over. Okay? It's going to hurt a little bit. Pinch, count to 5. Close his eyes. Dentist goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5, 4 3/4, 5. And he pulls it out. He goes, look at that. He lies to me. What do you mean 5? What 5? That's not 5. So finally, trying to explain to him that he's not mean. Because he's not mean, why is he sticking a needle into my gums? Because he doesn't want you to feel pain. He's like, what? Doesn't want me to feel pain, that's why he's sticking a needle into my gums. Now go explain to the kid that what a root canal feels like. Now, the Rabbi Shalom has just as much Rahmanis on us as a dentist does. Do we understand? The dentist is giving him the Novocaine injection, knowing it's going to inflict pain because that's his only way of avoiding the more serious pain. So don't you think that when we experience pain in our lives, it's not rachamim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't doing it to us in order to avoid a more difficult situation. You're going to say, that's the dentist, he has no other way of avoiding the pain of the root canal, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu can make a root canal without pain, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu can make you don't need the root canal. So again, there's a process where we have to go through certain matzavim. That's our kapara in life. But the understanding that the Rabbi Shalom is doing it for us. Also, this dentist guy that had interesting mahalach. I had one kid, different kid. We have a lot of fun at home. He used to, if you didn't hold him down by that dentist chair, he raced off. And once I had the dentist and 2 nurses trying to pull him in the waiting room underneath from underneath one of the couches. And he was holding on to that couch for dear life. They started dragging it into the thing. So then he started a mahalach that he told me he would say, hold the kid. He read it someplace in a book. The parent should sit on the dentist chair, and you hold the kid. And the kid has a sense of security then. He feels that no one's out to kill him here. It's done for his purpose, because he trusts the parent. And sometimes the child even cuddles up and falls asleep. And by some of my other children at work, except for one kid, I'm holding him, and the dentist, is all set to put in a filling. And he already mixed the filling. And as he's about to put in the filling, the kid whips out of my hands and runs back under the couch. And I'm like, ha! And he's like, oh no. And finally he says, hey, you need a filling. What, me? Yeah. And he goes after my tooth. Right, so I'm not wasting this. You know what I mean? So, because the child feels that he's being held by the parent, somehow there's a sense of trust. He understands. And I think that if a person could be makir, that the Rebbeinu Shalom is holding you, that your parent is holding you, even in difficult situations, it's much easier to endure. The Heilig Origina once said as follows. He said that the entire world, and everything that happens in the world, is in the Torah. And the entire Torah is in Chumash Bereshis. And the entire Chumash Bereshis is in Parashas Bereshis. And the entire Parashas Bereshis is in the first pasuk of Bereshis. And the entire first pasuk of Bereshis is in the Beis. And the entire Beis is in the Dat of the Beis. And the Dat of the Beis has such soidos and such secrets that you don't even see it in the Sefer Torah. In other words, when we come up of Yenevelt, there's a famous word, down here in this world there are no answers, up there are no kashas. It's not pshat that the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to have to explain to us. It's going to be as simple as looking as the dat. Aha, that's who I am. And that's why I have to go through every single aspect in my life. So the Ramban says a Davar Pel, it says about the Dar HaMabul, there were kaitzis netiyos. They chopped off the saplings, the young trees. And the Ramban says, after a whole cheshbon, that at one point he says that the Dar HaMabel had no problem with all of the Asarim Amoris, any of the Amoris, except for Bereshis Bar Lakim. You take out Bereshis Bar Lakim, the Tatsha yards, Desha, Vayomer Lakim yard they can deal with. Why? What does the Ramban mean? Because Bereshis Bara Elikim means that the entire world has a cheshbon. That everything goes back to that dot in Bereshis. And every experience that we have in this world and whom we deal with is connected to where we are in that dot. And that meant accountability. And that meant that you have to deal in a certain way with the people around you. That your purpose in life is to serve them. And that was Hepach, the Inyan of the Dar HaMabel. And therefore when it says, Leinechtam Gzardinam Ela Ala Gezo, so Rav Shua explains besides the Pashup Shat, it means that if a person does not believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me a wife and children and a house to be able to perform Hachnasas Archim, to be able to raise Doivas and Klal Yisrael, to be able to do my share for someone else, that's Gzela. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu give it to you? Imagine you send someone an expense account to Taipei in Japan, first class, biggest restaurants. He doesn't do what he had to do. He's too tired to meet the clients. He comes down. It's the biggest Gzela at Shayach. The Rabbi Shalom sending us down to this world is big stuff. It's not easy. Min HaShemayim. The Malachim said, what are you doing, Rabbi Shalom? And if we don't understand that we're working for HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our gifts in life are a means by which we have to be masakin ourselves by helping others, that's Gzela. There's an expense account, you're not using it. There's a famous story of this guy sitting in a city park, and one of those green trucks pull up. And two guys get out, and one guy spends 3 hours digging a hole. The next guy gets out of the truck, he spends 3 hours filling up the hole. The truck starts driving away. So this guy in the park, he's sitting on the bench, he runs after this truck, he says, you guys got to tell me, what was that all about? So he says, well, I'm Phil. This is Barry. He says, yeah. He says, usually we're a trio. We Phil, Henry, and Barry. Yeah. Phil digs the hole, Barry plants the tree, and Henry puts the earth back in. He says, Barry wasn't here today, though, so we just did the other two parts, you know what I mean? If a person believes, let me get away with what I have to and get what I want, who cares? But if I'm here, I'm serving the Rabbi Shalom for a purpose, the purpose of life is very, very different. You look at everything very, very different. So I had a Rosh Yeshiva that once he made a whole thing, he took out one paper towel, and he did a whole demonstration to show us how you can wipe your hands with one paper towel. And then, it costs the yeshiva money and so on. So I don't know if I do one paper towel, but I do tell the kids, who says you're allowed to use paper towels for book covers or everything else you're doing there, throwing it at each other? Everything you have is there for a purpose. Right, so I finally gave them spitballs, right? So I finally gave them a list of all the things you shouldn't use paper towels for. And they always come up with one more that I never thought of. So there's one kid, he walks in at 10:30, he's walking in late, and he's wiping his hands with a paper towel. Trying to figure, he's just walking in now. I said, you're coming from the bathroom? He says, no. I said, why are you walking with a paper towel? He says, because when the principal sees him in the hallway, he wants him to think that he's coming from the bathroom. So I always keep paper towels in my briefcase. He shouldn't think that I'm walking in from the street now, okay? Everything has its purpose in its own way. Now, the many asked the kasha that in order for the teva to work, there had to be multiple miracles. There had to be multiple nisim. There had to be, or else, al pi derech teva, you couldn't get all the animals in the world into a teva, it couldn't have survived. So if it was a ness anyway, so why did Kadosh Baruch Hu have to make Noach work for 120 years? And to be so tired that he was spitting blood, that he couldn't work anymore. So what was the purpose of doing it? So there's a very yisaidistic maral. And the maral says, Yesh Seder Nisim. The maral says that Kadosh Baruch Hu makes Nisim for all of us. But only when we do our max. When we do our max and we are yoitza our chiyah v'shtadlis, then the Kadosh Baruch Hu comes in with the nest, which is either b'derech hatev or shaloi b'derech hatev. Now, why did Noach have to be a zookeeper? Couldn't the Kadosh Baruch Hu at least give Noach an automatic feeder? Right? So that famous story, the baby camel says to the mother camel, why do we have long eyelashes? Says, my child, Hashem made that. Protect our eyes from the dust storms in the desert. So why do we have these split hooves that are so split? That's to protect us. We shouldn't slip from the hot sand. Why do we have this hump? That's because we walk so many miles to store the water in our back. And why do we have these ears? That's to protect us from different sounds, and we should pick up, alert different things in the desert. You have any more questions, my child? The child says, yes, mommy camel. What? So why are we in the Bronx Zoo? right? And the answer is you're in the Bronx Zoo so people can see that flaw sabayre. Who says that's not just as much as a purpose as someone else's? That that little vertel has what it is. So Noach becomes a zookeeper. Why is Noach a zookeeper? Why is Noach a zookeeper? I had it once. I had one class. It was a lot of fun, this class. It's hard to get them to learn, especially by Chazara. And they want the picture of them all like standing over a taisvis and working it together. And working at this. So I once did, I had this map of the Bronx Zoo in my car from Chalamoid. So I knew if I tell them to do it, they'll never do it. So what I did was I told them we may go to, they were nudging me to go to the Bronx Zoo. Every Jew knows the Bronx Zoo is free on Wednesday, you know that. And so I spread this thing over open Gemara one day. Everyone came running, whoa! And they all went running over and they were like, arguing over this. And I took the picture and it looked so good. And the boys standing, right? Very deceiving world. Why does Noach have to be a zookeeper? Why? Schachter, Michtav, Melio, and many others, because Noach had to engage in non-stop chesed in order for the world to have a kiyum, in order for him to survive. Now Noach went through overwhelming pressure, right? But we now know that was the reason for his survival. The only way Noach could survive is for him engaging in constant feeding of the animals. Had Noach stopped for a minute, he would have never survived. How many times in our life do we feel we have such pressure, I need a night off, I can't handle this anymore? What is the Kadosh Baruch Hu doing to me? Don't you understand that sometimes the Kadosh Baruch Hu gives us this non-stop pressure? And when Noach hesitated just a minute, the lion took a bite out of him. Well, that seems like a very strict einish. Because Noach hesitated a minute. The teretz is because the only reason Noach was alive was in this chus of non-stop pressure feeding the people. So once he didn't feed the lion, he no longer had this chus. So therefore was Vayishar Ach Noach. Isn't this a lesson in life that when we're faced with non-stop pressure, do you realize this pressure is what Kadosh Baruch Hu is giving this to you? That we all have to do what we think we're supposed to do for our Kadosh Baruch Hu? This is a famous mashal, the Dubna Magid, this mashal, that there was a lady in the town that she would talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but mamish like, and nobody really wanted to marry her. When I say the story, scratch this on the record, but they say this. She this girl comes and she complains. I'm married 3 years already, and my husband doesn't talk to me. So they go to the husband's class and teacher. They say, "What kind of menschlichkeit is that?" He goes, "I'm doing everything you told me. I told you not to talk to your wife for 3 years? No, you told me not to interrupt her. That's what you told me, right?" So, okay. Scratch that one. Okay, no, just a joke. All right, next. So now, God is over Shimshon Pinkus. He brings that Tisha Kavan Sicha Yardul Yoilam. Sicha is a lashon of tefillah. That the woman has a koyach of tefillah more so than the man does in certain ways. Okay, we have an equal opportunity employer here. Okay. So there was this particular girl that talked and talked and talked, and she couldn't do a shidduch. So they did a shidduch with, there was a guy in town that didn't hear very well. So they did a shidduch with him. It's perfect shidduch. Problem was also that he was extremely ugly, this man. But this girl was also very nearsighted. So it was just right. He couldn't hear her talk. She couldn't see how ugly he was. It was a beautiful shidduch. They had shalom bayis. Then one day a doctor comes to town, cures his ears, and cures her eyes. Oh, he was dead sorry afterwards. Sure, the whole thing fell apart. Sometimes in the Rabbi Shalom, if only you would take this problem away from me. He says, you don't know who you are. You don't know why you're down here in this world. You want me to take that problem away? That doesn't mean we can't ask the Kadosh Baruch Hu to take problems away from us. But it just means that in the course, and that's why it says, Hakina v'atava v'akavit metzina sa'adam min ha'olam. Right? Min ha'olam. Because we're here for a certain purpose. And if you're not being who you are, because you're jealous of someone else, or because of a taiva or kavod, you're distorting your purpose, right? So even though there's a whole thing that two presidential candidates, I guess one is the president, one is the candidate, but they practice for the debate. How do you practice for the debate? You get the meanest guy, okay? So if I was a Democrat, I would say, and it was very hard to find a guy meaner than Romney, all right, or the other way around, okay? You get the meanest guy, and you have them debate, and they practice. And he rips him apart. So he's ready for the debate. So let's say a guy's going to say, oh, he's the president. I'm practicing the debate. Mr. President, you're great. You're wonderful. The economy, he doesn't only compliments. He's so sweet. Then he gets to the debate. He gets chopped up. You're not doing him a taiva. Then the Rabbi Shalom is giving us a rough time. The Rabbi Shalom is giving us what we need. Rabbi Yosef Engel, tonight's his yard, said he was a goin adir. So once he was running away in World War I, there were such sorrows over there. So Nebuch, there were two women that gave in their clothes to wash. They're running. It's all the clothes they had. To a washer, and the washer died. And the next day they came to collect their clothes. And there was a fight between two customers. One of them said, Kula Shali. And the other one said, Chatzi Shali. Typical Shnai Machzim B'Talis. And one of them said, the whole thing is mine. And the other one said, no, half is mine, but I don't know the other half is, but half is mine. So they came to Rabbi Yosef Engel and said, there you go, the first mission above Mitzvah, who remembers it more than he was a god, they wrote Svarim, all the Rishayim, Achreinim, all the yeshivas. Paskin the Shail. He says, I have a different way to Paskin the Shail. He says, come back to me tomorrow. At night, he told his wife to put her own clothes into the pile. They came back the next day, they said, repeat your shilas. One of them said, I don't know, I know this and this is mine. The other one said, the whole thing is mine, the whole thing is mine. I said, no, it's not, because part of that is mine. I just put it in. You're lying, okay? Try to get to what's not us, then we have nothing. So Rav Shlomo Zalman said, you have to say, what is a b'chol me'odecha? B'chol me'odecha is all the money you come into contact with. I'm sitting here by a table, sitting here by a phone. I'm sitting next to such wonderful Zisa people. Wherever you are in life, your business transactions, your customers, you have a chiyuv to make a positive hashpah on them. It's your money in the sense it's your achrayus. Whatever we own is b'chol mi'aydecha. You have to make the point that you want to make with what you have. And he quotes the Mesilas Yesharim that says that when we come down to this world, we come down with all of our chafetzim, anything we're going to own. And if we do the things right, those chafetzim, those articles have a tikkun. If not, they disintegrate. That's the Inyan, and the animals were corrupt in the Dar HaMabul. The animals don't have a b'chira. But the answer is each animal potentially belonged to a member of the Dar HaMabul. By him becoming corrupt, the animal followed suit. Conversely, you find by the donkey of Pinchas Vayaryer, just the opposite, that he wouldn't want to eat from nothing that was taken of Maasros. Incidentally, I once heard this. The donkey of Pinchas Vayaryer, he didn't want to eat the food. They strained the food, they didn't want to eat it. Strained the food, they didn't want to eat it. Strained the bed, they didn't want to eat it. What do you want? So, what are you being so finicky? So Pinchas Vayaryer said, you took off Maasros. Took off Maasros, he ate the food. So there's a halacha that if you have no choice, the Eved, you're allowed to eye, let's say on Shabbos, you're allowed to eye part of the food and say, okay, that's the meiser, and you could eat the rest. So why couldn't the donkey eat the food at all? The donkey could have just left over part and say, that's meiser, if he's such a big Talmud Chacham. So they say, the donkey would have done that, but then he would have thought, the balabas is not such a Talmud Chacham, the balabas will think he doesn't eat so much food, so the next day he'll give him even less. He'll have to take off part of that. At the end he said, I may be from, but I don't want to starve to death. You know what I mean? They didn't want to do that. So Zakta Mesilas Yesharim, let's wrap things up over here. That there are three things that distract the person from his tafkid down here in life. And we get so, when we face a crisis, we're so overwhelmed with the crisis. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm in trouble. Without thinking, what do I ever do? I do my let's rest up to Kadosh Baruch Hu. Sometimes a person falls into a matzav of litzanis. Everything is a big joke. Doesn't get to doing things seriously. I heard from my Meshgiach, Schachter Mendelovitz used to have this unbelievable shalosh sudas. And he sent all these people throughout America, the beginnings of Torah Messiah. These were the Shalashudas Talmidim, and that's how they got warmed up. He says there was only one group he wasn't matzliach with, none of them were Shem Shabbos even. He says if Schachter Fischel gave his first shmooze about fish by Shalashudas, he's talking about the Yonim Yonim and fish, and this guy said, what a pity, I don't like fish, and everyone laughed. He said he lost that, because of that joke, he lost that whole group. There's like that's and there's being in the wrong chevra. Being in the wrong, these are the three things that distract us from who we are. So the Mesilas Yesharim says very clearly what we're saying. He says if a person falls into this matzav of litzanis and he doesn't get what's happening, so they have to give him a tougher message. But he says, no, he brings a pasuk in Mishlei that the leitzim got to be hit. He says, Zeu davar shadin noisim, that if a person looks around and says, the Rebbe wants something from me, why is my boiler not going on? What can I improve in my life? Why is this person sitting next to me in shul? What ashpah do I have to have on him? This guy's calling and I have to speak to him now. My coffee's going to get cold. Well, that's what brings Eliyahu Hanavi when your coffee gets cold. All of this creates a massive where it's not necessary for him to be punished. It goes much faster than that. So I tell you, Rabbi Sai, I had a friend of mine, he has an electronics store. So he said that he got a call once, 3 o'clock in the morning. Hello, Mr. So-and-so, yeah? The refrigerator we got, it's beautiful. Really? Why are you calling me at 3 a.m. in the morning to tell me that? He says, because it was delivered at 2:45 a.m. That's why I am calling you to tell you at 3 a.m. That's one story. The other story he told me is that famous story that he said it actually happened to him, where he was delivering, somebody ordered a refrigerator, he said, do you mind if it comes in a television box? He said, well, why would I want my refrigerator to come in a television box? He says, why can't you just give it to me in a refrigerator box? He said, I used up all the refrigerator boxes for televisions. So he was telling about a certain customer that he had. The guy just wasn't happy. He wasn't happy. It's not right. So he says the thermostat doesn't work perfectly. So he explained to me, and again, I don't know what I'm talking about here, but he said that no thermostat works perfectly. He says there's a compressor that makes it cold, and you set the thermostat, let's say it's 50 degrees, so when it gets 51, 52, 53, the thermostat says stop. It gets to 50, the thermostat turns it off, and the compressor slowly turns off, starts going down, 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 then the compressor turns it on again. But the thermostat, more or less, am I making sense here? So, no, little. Anyway. Okay, don't correct me, only if I'm right. Yes. Okay, right. What's it called? Anticipator, right. So, I anticipated you would say I'm right, Mashi. Okay. We have it out here, yes. So the point is that the thermostat doesn't make it go at 52 degrees. It sets a target. The target is 52 degrees. Gets too cold, shuts it off. Gets too warm, turns it on. He said, life is a thermostat. You understand? We have to set our target. It's never perfect. We'll always be too hot, too cold. Yes, Sarah says, you see, you'll never get it right. We're not supposed to get it right. We're supposed to set targets and try. And the Rabbi Shem does the rest. Dor HaMabul didn't work with a thermostat. They had perfect. It was always Los Angeles weather. Bein Pesach Latzeres. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. It falls apart. Our avodas Hashem is we set the thermostat and we correct ourselves. When do we have perfect weather? When we're passing through between summer and winter, somewhere in the middle between winter and summer. So the Rebbe Hashem gives us a little bit of a look. As we're passing through, one day it's going to be perfect. Right now, I want you to correct yourself. That is the point. Now, a lot of people, I remember once walking into my house, it was freezing. It was the winter. We were away for Shabbos. It was like 30 degrees in the house. So one of the kids goes and moves the thermostat all the way up to 90. So why are you moving it to 90? Because it's so cold. I said, you don't want it to be 90. You want it to be 70. Yeah, but it's so cold. So move it to 70. No, but I wanted to get hot quicker. It doesn't get hot quicker. It's just going to keep going till 90. A lot of times in life, our response is, no more. That's it. I've had enough. I'm storming out. Don't try to overcorrect things. Be who you are. So if Shor brings the Medrash, the Medrash says the first 2,000 years of the world was Toyu. Nothing. Next years were Torah. Next 2,000 Torah. The next 2,000 years were Mashiach. So if Shor explains, the first 2,000 years of the world, everybody was on their own to find the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why you had Nevi'im and Bamais were Mutter. And then it changed. Then there has to be a Torah that guides us. But in Torah, everybody was on their own. He says, then the last 2,000 years are the Yemaisa Mashiach. The Yemaisa Mashiach is correction. We're correcting what went wrong the first 4,000 years. In the process of correction, you can't be on your own. And that's what the Anshe Knesset Gdela were Masakin. The Chassam Sofer says also it's Tefillah B'tzibur. You can't be on your own. We have to bring you back. The Beis HaMikdash was to bring people back. There's a dangerous achdus that created the Dar HaFlaga. But there's a sense that if I stop and think, Rabbi Shem, what do you want from me? You want me to be good. How am I good? I want to be serious. I want to join a chavraya. You come to yeshiva at night to learn for an hour. You're not coming to learn for an hour. You're identifying yourself. You decide where you daven Shabbos, not just where you're davening Shabbos. You're identifying yourself. It's a metzias. Who your friends are is who you are. And through tzibur, we become people. Now, as I heard from my Mashgiach, as it gets closer and closer to Mashiach, the world is closer and closer. We have an interactive world. People deal in Hong Kong and Taipei and emails and back and forth, and this guy is a whole shaila. If it becomes Chalav Yisrael or Chalav or Bishul Yisrael, because somebody over here flips a switch in a factory in China, right? We have a world that's so connected. Because being that the tafkid of the world in the last 2,000 years, and more as it comes closer to Mashiach, is that we each correct mistakes of previous generations, or even more so, as many explain who we were in previous generations. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, listen, in your previous Gilgal, you lived in the same town. Yankel stole money from Moshe. That money got to go back. Our Yankel and Moshe are different sides of the world. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no time to bring you to the same side of the world. There has to be an interaction. There has to be a kind of world where the entire world comes together. They said also, we have double names, right? Moshe, Chaim, Yankel. Baruch Gedalia, what's the famous story? The guy goes to the Rav, what should I name my kid? I don't know. What should I name my kid? Leave me alone. What should I name my kid? I don't know. But please, you got to tell me what I should name my kid. Name him Chaim, Baruch, Gedalia, Moshe. I don't care. Right? And the poor kid was named Chaim, Baruch, Gedalia, Moshe. I don't care, right? Why do we have double names today? Why do we have double names? We never had a previous generations, because we have multiple neshamas. The Baruch says enough already. We got to straighten this out. It got to be connected. You know, there's a bunch of birds. in the Teva that we're dealing with. There's the chul bird. The Medrash says this bird never asked Noach for anything. Nothing. He says, and Noach said, "You're so hungry. I never fed you." He says, "I don't want to bother you. I see how busy you are." So he gave him a bracha. You're going to live forever. Don't push. You get what you get. That's such a bracha of Tchias HaMesim. There's the oirav. Everything is a conspiracy. Everything is a plot. Everything is fear. And then there's the yoina. The yoina says, "You send me, I'm ready to go. You want me to go up a rope ladder? I'm going up a rope ladder. Where you send me to go, that is where I am going to go. Life is going to go on. And I'm going to have an appreciation for the simple things." There's the yard side of the Bluja Rebbe. He once touched, "Give me lechem lecha ubeged lilbush." He says in the concentration camps, often you would trade a piece of bread for a coat, for a jacket, because you were freezing to death. Or you would trade a jacket for a piece of bread, you were starving. He said, you don't understand the bracha of being able to eat your bread and to put on your begadim. And Hashem lil elikim. And to understand that rachmim and din, it's all the same. It's all rachmim. I want to conclude, there's a story that Shem Tov once said. Every once in a while he would say, so-and-so just saved the world with his tefillas. He said there's a bar mitzvah bacher that just saved the world with his barchi. He was so tamimistic. So they traveled to find this bar mitzvah bacher. Turned out he was a little kid in a little town, and his zayda told him that there's a yidden, there's a besmedrish, there was no besmedrish in this town. And he went to his father, he said, "I want to go to my mitzvah dab with a minion." His father said, "I don't have time for this, I have to milk the cows, there's no shul, and hundreds of miles goodbye." And the kid was crying, he had such a craving to say, "Omen Yehesh Mei Rabbah." And he had a little siddur. So what did he do? We went into the barn, and he made a minion. The cow, the donkey, the goat, he had a nice minion, goat, beard, kosher minion. He put them all together. He put yarmulkes, kaplach on them, and he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Baruch Hu es Hashem Avayrach," with tears in his eyes, and they all sorts of noises. So it says he saved the world. We think you don't have to be the big Gadol Hadar, the big Rosh Yeshiva. You have to be who you are. You do who you are, you are masakin what Noach did in the Teva, and you save your world.
So how does the emperor